Get out of my kitchen. Those 4 words landed on Kwame Asante like a hand pressed flat against his chest. He had not spoken. He had not moved. He was standing at the prep station in the back corner of Meridian, the corner nobody wanted, near the grease trap and the walk-in's rattling compressor, holding a small glass ramekin with both hands, waiting. Executive Chef Roland Hess did not look up from the pass. I said, "Get out." It was 11:14 on a Tuesday morning. The lunch service at Meridian hadn't started yet. The dining room was still dark, chairs still upturned on tables. Kwame had been in since 6, doing what he always did, portioning stocks, washing celery root, keeping his head down. He was 24 years old and he was a prep cook, the lowest rung in a kitchen that held 4 AAA diamonds and a waiting list 3 months long. The ramekin in his hands held a sauce. He had made it from what was left at the end of Monday's prep. A handful of overripe plantains that were going to be binned, some charred scallion tops, a small brick of dried shrimp paste that had been sitting unlabeled in the back of the dry storage shelf for God knows how long. He'd worked on the proportions after his shift. He'd stayed an hour late. He'd written nothing down, because the whole thing was in his hands and his nose the way his grandmother had taught him, by feel, by smell, by the sound the sauce made when it hit the pan. He had set it on the pass because he didn't know what else to do with it. Roland Hess finally looked up. He was 51, broad in the shoulders, with the kind of deep tan that came from golfing, not cooking. 2 diamonds on the lapel of his chef's coat. He had been written up in Food and Wine. His picture was on the wall of the front vestibule. He looked at the ramekin. He looked at Kwame. "What is this?" It wasn't a question. "A sauce," Kwame said. "I used the plantains that were going to be. I know what plantains are." Hess picked up the ramekin. He brought it to his nose. Something moved across his face. Something brief that Kwame would think about for a long time after, and then it was gone. He set the ramekin down on the edge of the pass. Then he tipped it over. The sauce ran across the stainless steel in a slow dark ribbon and dripped off the side onto the rubber mat. "This is not what we do here," Hess said. "We don't do whatever this is. We don't use scraps. We don't experiment on my pass. You are a prep cook. You wash. You portion. You don't create." Kwame looked at the sauce spreading across the floor mat. It smelled the way his grandmother's kitchen in Accra had smelled on Sunday mornings, warm and low and real. "Yes, chef," he said. "I want you on dish rotation for the rest of the week." The dining room of Meridian seated 64. The kitchen ran 11 full-time staff. Kwame had been there 8 months, hired through a workforce reentry program that Meridian participated in mostly for the tax credit. Before Meridian, he had done 2 years at a county jail in upstate New York for a conviction he'd earned at 19. Wrong place, wrong people, the kind of thing that closes a lot of doors permanently. The program coordinator who placed him was a woman named Ms. Okafor, who had seen his intake paperwork and noticed that under previous employment he had written, "Home cook, ages 9 to 22. Primary cook for family of 6. She had circled it. She had made a call. The truth was Kwame had been cooking since he was old enough to stand on a step stool. His grandmother, his mother's mother, who everyone called Nana Abena, had raised him from the time he was 7 after his mother left, and his father's hours made him functionally absent. Nana Abena was from Kumasi originally, but she had spent 30 years in the Bronx, and her cooking had absorbed both places without apology. She kept a notebook, not a nice notebook, a green composition book, the kind you bought for 99 cents at the pharmacy, with grease stains on the cover and phone numbers in the margins and dates written in her cramped left-handed script. She had given it to Kwame when he turned 17. "This is not a recipe book," she told him. "A recipe tells you what to do. This tells you how to think." He had read it so many times the binding was soft. When he was on dish rotation, he kept the notebook in his locker. When he was on prep, he kept it in the breast pocket of his cook's coat, which he knew was probably not sanitary and absolutely did not care. Roland Hess did not speak to him again for 11 days. The kitchen at Meridian had a rhythm like any other high-end kitchen. Tightly controlled, hierarchical, organized around the needs of the people who had never once set foot in the back of the house. The sous chef was a man named Beckett, who was 28 and had gone to the CIA and who referred to Kwame reliably as the program guy. The other prep cook, a woman named Janessa, had worked there 3 years and treated Kwame with a neutral fairness that was the closest thing to kindness he found in that building. She was the one who told him about the annual staff meal competition. "They do it every April," she said. not looking up from her brunoise. Every station submits a dish. They plate it up for the ownership group and the investors. The chef's choice wins, gets put on the menu for a month. Kwame kept peeling. Do prep cooks submit? Technically, yes. A pause. Nobody from prep has ever submitted. Why not? She set her knife down and looked at him directly, which was unusual for Janessa. Because Hess chooses. And Hess doesn't choose things he doesn't recognize. Kwame thought about that for the rest of his shift. He submitted anyway. He wrote his name on the form in the break room and folded it and put it in the box by the door. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't ask for permission. He went home and he sat at his kitchen table with Nana Abena's notebook open in front of him, and he started from the beginning. The dish he was thinking about was one his grandmother made in the fall. A stewed lamb with groundnut base, finished with something she called the correction, which was a reduction she built separately and folded in at the end. The correction was the thing. It was the reason the dish didn't taste like any lamb stew he had ever eaten anywhere else. He had watched her make it 40, 50 times. He had made it himself for years, but he had never made it in a professional kitchen. He had never made it for anyone who hadn't already loved him. The week before the competition, he came in an hour early every day. He used the prep kitchen when it was empty. He sourced the dried peppers himself. Not through the restaurant supplier, but from a shop in the Bronx he had been going to his whole life, a place that sold things by weight out of open barrels and smelled like the back of his grandmother's cabinet. He charged them to himself. He told no one what he was making. The competition was held on a Thursday. The ownership group came in at noon. 3 men in suits and a woman in a blazer who turned out to be the food editor of a regional magazine, there apparently as a guest. Beckett submitted a cured salmon with compressed cucumber. One of the line cooks submitted a mushroom risotto. The pastry chef sent out a savory tart. Kwame's dish arrived at the table last. He had plated it himself in a wide, shallow bowl, the stew dark and deep in color, the correction folded through so you could see the variation in tone, where it was richer, where it was lighter, where the fat had settled in small golden pools. He had sliced a piece of fried plantain and fanned it across the top. It smelled, in the dining room of Meridian with its white tablecloths and its diamond rating on the wall, like a Sunday morning in the Bronx. He stood in the back and watched them eat. He watched the food editor set her spoon down, pick it up, take another bite, set it down again, more slowly. He watched one of the men in suits say something to the man next to him. He watched Roland Hess, who was standing near the pass, with his arms crossed, watching the table too. Hess's face did the same thing it had done over the ramekin of sauce. That brief movement, something recognizing something, and then the jaw tightened and it was gone. The ownership group deliberated for 40 minutes. They chose Beckett's salmon. Kwame found out through Janessa. She came to find him in the walk-in, where he was doing inventory. Beckett won, she said. He nodded. He kept writing numbers on his clipboard. Kwame. She waited until he looked up. The food editor asked who made the lamb stew. He stopped writing. Hess told her it was a team effort, Janessa said. Her voice was even. He told her the recipe was developed in-house. Kwame set his clipboard down on a sheet pan. The walk-in compressor rattled and kicked. His breath came out in visible puffs. He thought about Nana Abena's green notebook in his breast pocket. He thought about 30 years of her Sundays. He thought about the correction, the thing that couldn't be written down because she had told him, you can write the ingredients, but you cannot write the hand. You cannot write the knowing. He picked his clipboard back up. Thank you for telling me, he said. He resigned 2 weeks later. He wrote a short email. He did not explain. He did not argue. What he did instead was go back to the Bronx and rent a commissary kitchen for Saturday mornings, 6 hours a week, the cheapest block they had, and start cooking. He had some money saved, not much. He sold food at first the way people sell things when they have no infrastructure. Word of mouth, text messages, a table at a Saturday market in his neighborhood where he paid $40 for a 6-foot fold-out and brought his stew in a hotel pan wrapped in foil. He brought the fried plantains in a separate container. He brought the groundnut sauce in mason jars. He sold out in an hour and 40 minutes the first week. In 2 hours the second week because he brought more. By the 5th week there was a line. He was not a social media person. He had an Instagram he hadn't posted on in 2 years. But the food editor from the competition, her name was Phoebe Strand, and she wrote for a publication called Harbor and Table, had been at that table in Meridian. She had asked about the lamb stew, and she had, apparently, not forgotten. She found him at the Saturday market in October. She was wearing a coat and holding a cup of coffee. And she stood in his line like everyone else all the way at the back for 22 minutes. When she got to the front, she ordered the stew. She ate it standing at the edge of his table. Then she ordered another bowl. "You were at Meridian," she said. "Not a question." "I was. That dish at the competition, the lamb." He waited. "Hess told me it was developed in-house. That's what he said." She looked at him for a moment. "Is this the same dish?" "It's my grandmother's dish," Kwame said. "It's been her dish since before I was born." Phoebe Strand nodded slowly. She pulled a card from her coat pocket and set it on the table. "I'd like to write about this," she said, "if you're willing." He looked at the card. He thought about the ramekin tipping over on the pass, the sauce running across the floor. "Okay," he said. "The piece ran in Harbor and Table in February. It was not a small piece. It was 4,000 words, and it had photographs. The market table, the mason jars, the green composition notebook open to a page in Nana Abina's handwriting, and a portrait of Kwame in the commissary kitchen on a Saturday morning, stirring a pot, not looking at the camera. Phoebe Strand had written about the dish itself, and about the market, and about the commissary kitchen. She had written about the workforce re-entry program, and about Nana Abena, and about Kumasi and the Bronx, and the way those two places had been living in the same pot for 30 years, without anyone outside the family knowing. She had not written about Meridian by name. She had not written about Roland Hess by name. She had written, "He left a kitchen where his recipe was claimed by someone else, and he took the thing that couldn't be claimed, the knowing, with him." The piece was shared 40,000 times in the first week. What happened after that happened faster than Kwame had a language for. A restaurant group in Brooklyn reached out. Then a hotel food and beverage director in Manhattan. Then a woman named Celia, no, he did not know her last name yet, who said she represented a small hospitality investment fund, and would he be interested in sitting down. He sat down with her in a coffee shop on 116th Street, and she slid a folder across the table, and he read it slowly, and then he asked if he could take it home. He called Miss Okafor that night. She told him to get a lawyer. He got a lawyer. He signed with the investment group in April. By June, he had a space. A narrow storefront in Crown Heights with exposed brick and 12 seats, and a kitchen that was technically too small for what he was trying to do, and exactly right for everything else. He called it Abina. He didn't do a soft opening. He opened on a Saturday, the same day of the week he'd been selling stew at the market, and he put the green composition notebook behind glass on the wall near the door, where everyone could see it. He didn't put it in a frame. He didn't explain it with a placard. It was just there, open to a page that had his grandmother's handwriting on it, and if you looked closely you could see the grease stains and the margin phone numbers and the date, 1987. Written in her cramped left-handed script, the reservation list filled in 14 days. In the 10th month after Abina opened, the James Beard Foundation sent a letter. He opened it at his desk in the back of the kitchen at 6 a.m. on a Wednesday before the morning prep, with a cup of instant coffee because he still hadn't bought a real coffee maker. He read it twice. He set it down. He picked up his grandmother's notebook from the prep shelf where it lived. Now, instead of his breast pocket, and he held it in both hands for a moment without opening it. He put it back. He went to the stove and started the groundnut base for the day's stew. The nomination was announced publicly in January, the James Beard Award for Best New Restaurant in New York. Kwame learned about Roland Hess around the same time, not because he was looking, but because Janessa texted him. Janessa, who still worked at Meridian, who had stayed in touch through the occasional message over the months. She sent him a link to a short item in a trade publication. Meridian had lost its 4th AAA diamond in the annual reevaluation. The ownership group had parted ways with the executive chef. The restaurant was, as of that month, closed for an extended renovation with no reopening date announced. He read it once. He did not save the link. What he thought about was not Hess. What he thought about was the food editor's question. Who made the lamb stew? And Hess's answer, and what it cost a person to lie that reflexively. To look at a thing and recognize it and then deny it. To be that afraid. He had thought for a long time that the moment on the pass, the ramekin tipping over, the sauce running dark across the steel, was the worst thing that had happened to him in that kitchen. He had replayed it the way you replay things that humiliate you, involuntarily, at odd moments. He stopped replaying it somewhere around the time Abena hit its 3rd month, because the thing about the correction, The thing Nana Abena had told him, and that he now told the two cooks he had hired, both of them younger than him, both of them from programs like the one that had placed him at Meridian, was that you couldn't separate it out. The correction was not an addition. It was not garnish. It was built from the same pot, folded back in. It changed the flavor of everything that came before it. What Hess had taken, or tried to take, was a dish. What he couldn't touch was the knowing. The award ceremony was in Chicago in June. Kwame wore a suit he had bought 2 days before from a department store on 34th Street. He sat at a table with the investment group and Phoebe Strand, who had become something like a friend over the past year, and Miss Okafor, who cried during the nominee video reel and did not apologize for it. His category was announced at 8:47 p.m. When they read his name, he did not move for a moment. He heard Phoebe say his name. He felt Miss Okafor's hand on his arm. He stood up. He walked to the stage. The room was full of people who had been doing this for decades. People with columns and ratings and names on buildings. And Kwame Asante, 26 years old, Crown Heights, formerly of a county jail in upstate New York, grandson of Abena of Kumasi and the Bronx, stood at a microphone and held a small glass trophy and said the only thing he had prepared. "My grandmother kept a notebook," he said. "She told me it wasn't a recipe book. She said a recipe tells you what to do. The notebook tells you how to think." He paused. "I'm still learning how to think." He walked off the stage. He went back to his table. He set the trophy down and picked up his phone and texted Janessa. 2 minutes later, she sent back a string of flame emojis and nothing else, and that felt exactly right. What nobody in that room knew, except Phoebe, who had asked him once and remembered. On the morning after the competition at Meridian, the morning after Beckett's salmon won, and Hess claimed the lamb stew as an in-house creation, Kwame had gone home and opened his grandmother's notebook. He hadn't read it. He'd just sat with it. And then he'd written, in the margin of one of the pages, in his own handwriting, underneath a note she had made in 1989, "The correction comes last. But you build it at the beginning, entirely." What she had meant by that, he was starting to